Okay, well, if you're visiting this morning, welcome. It's just great to see you. My name is Ali, and I'm the vicar here at St. Wins, and we are partway through a 2-week vision series. And so if you've come today, apologies that you're sort of going to get the second half, if you like, of a conversation that we started last week. And if you missed last week, I would really encourage you to go back on our website, find it on YouTube, and watch last week's talk, because everything I'm going to say today links in with what we talked about last week. And actually, last week was a significant shift and moment I felt spiritually for us as a church. We were talking about transformation. We were talking about what really matters. And it was about the transformation of ourselves as we follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And there was a significant spiritual shift I felt last week as I sensed people's spirit respond to that call of saying yes to Jesus, yes to his transformation in our life. And ministry last week was beautiful. You know, there were people all over the place last week who were just in conversation with God, actually being really honest with God about who they were and what they felt about things. And I sensed the Lord was so delighted that there was that vulnerability and honesty, because truthfully, that's really all that matters, is that we just want to be more like Jesus. That's what really matters, is transformation in him. And it's important that we get on board, as I say, with those ideas, because what I believe God is calling us into in this next season will be utterly, utterly dependent on whether we are being honest and vulnerable and transparent in that transformation journey in our hearts. Everything that we do here in this church only becomes authentic if we're really walking the walk. You know, very often, sort of Pentecostal, sort of American TV evangelists. I mean, we don't really necessarily have them in this country, but we all know that image of kind of like churches or leaders where it's all a little bit superfluous. It's a little bit surface. What they say doesn't really match in with what they're doing or where they're living their life. And, you know, my heart's desire is that for us as a community, if you dig a little bit deeper, you're still going to see Jesus. You know, we talk Jesus, but we live Jesus. That's what we need to be doing as a church community. And God is always in the business of restoration, of growth. And his vision for us is to be transformed, and for the church to be transformed. And now, as much as ever before, the church desperately needs to be transformed to reflect Jesus Christ. You know, the way that we think about church right now, if you are a follower of anything Anglican, you'll know that the Church of England over the last few years is in decline. The number of people that are coming along to Church of England churches are getting less and less and less each year. And there's a little flurry of growth that's happened over the last couple of years, but the stats are quite depressing. That is not the story, by the way, of the Christian church across the world. The Christian church across the world is growing. And it's growing in places that historically have not known Jesus. But they're the countries, they're the places that are growing in faith. But in this country, in the Church of England, we are seeing decline. And if you are a leader in the Church of England, that can be a fairly depressing place to be. You know, we've got a number of people in our congregation who are called into ordained leadership. Some of them are on that journey. Some of them have been ordained already. Tim is one of those people. We've got Dan, who's nearly getting to the point where he'll be ordained next summer. And we've got another number of people within our community who are discerning right now. God, are you calling me into ordained leadership within the Church of England? And that's always a massive question. But actually, when the Church of England looks fairly depressing, it's an even bigger question. God, are you really asking me to throw my lot in with this very dysfunctional, huge place that's actually got no money and is looking more and more and more uncertain? But the reality is that God knows what he's doing, doesn't he? The reality is that this isn't actually our church at all. The reality is that all I do as a leader, an ordained leader in the Church of England, is that I have to say, God, I put my own doubts aside and I listen to you and I follow where you are calling me. And I do not believe that the Church of England is dead. I do not believe that God has given up on the Church of England. And so we step in and we step forward and we say, do you know what, God, we go with you where you are calling us to be. And the reality is that the church, the gathering of people that follow Jesus, there's always been ups and downs. And if you look back across the early church in the New Testament, that was also true. They faced massive persecution. And yet that did not stop them from pursuing what God was calling them to do in Jesus. And actually, it's not just the New Testament. The Old Testament is the same story, not of a people group who were following Jesus, but were following Yahweh. They were following God. And even though the odds were stacked against them, they decided to put their all into trusting in the one who they could not see, but they knew was real. And today we're going to look at a passage in the Bible from the Old Testament. And if you read the stories of the nation of Israel and Judah in the Old Testament, they are stories of a people group, a kingdom or a nation whose flourishing is utterly dependent on whether they are strong in faith and focused on God, focused on the Lord. Whether they are in times of famine or whether they are in times of plenty. Linking in with harvest there. Did you see that? Thank you very much. Whether they're under attack from neighboring nations or in a time of peace, what really matters is where their hearts and their faith is rooted. So turn with me, would you, to the Old Testament, to 2 Kings chapter 19. So 2 Kings, there's two books in the Bible called Kings. There's 1 Kings and 2 Kings. And really they're a summary, a narrative of the kings of both Israel and Judah, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And if you read it all in one go, which I don't recommend, by the way, but if you ever did, it's literally watching like a graph going like this, because there are times that they get it right and times that they get it wrong. They get leaders, they get kings who are following God, and then they get kings who are not following God. And the fortune, the flourishing, if you like, of that kingdom will be utterly dependent on that king and whether or not they are listening to what God is saying. So 2 Kings chapter 19. And in this chapter, there is a king called Hezekiah, and he was the king of the tribe of Judah, which was in the southern part of what we call Israel today. There are 12 tribes of that nation that we call Israel. Confusingly, one of them was called Israel. And there were 2 tribes that became very prominent, Judah and Israel. And Judah was in the southern part of the kingdom. Israel was in the northern part of the kingdom. And they suffered enormous persecution, enormous attack. There were people coming in all the time trying to take them over and enslave them and take them away. And a few years earlier, King Hezekiah of the southern kingdom, he'd heard and witnessed the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire was to the east. And he knows that huge, impactful Assyrian Empire, sort of a splinter group of it actually, they're coming for the southern kingdom of Judah. And he knows they're on their way. But he has a prophet that works alongside him in the Old Testament, particularly in the Chronicles of 1 and 2 Kings. You have the kings who lead and rule, but you also have the prophets who come and speak God's authority. And in different seasons of the nation of Israel or that part of the world, they would have prophets or kings leading them. And at this time, it was the kings who led them. And the prophets spoke like an arrow, God's voice to the king. And then they would lead and rule, the idea was, in a sense, together. And the prophet Isaiah, who we know really well, he was around at that time and he worked with King Hezekiah. And he brings a word from God to King Hezekiah. There he is, not knowing what's going to happen next. He's waiting for this attack. He's very concerned that this attack is going to come. And Isaiah comes and he says this. He says that God was with Judah. God is with Judah. What a lovely, comforting thing for Isaiah to say. God is with you. And Isaiah says, and although there will be loss, there will be destruction, although things will not look in the way that they look for Judah right now, God would use the remnant of the people that were left after that attack, and he would grow Judah again. So that's the context of which this passage that we're going to read comes. And I was reading these verses in the summer, just as part of my reading plan, actually. And I felt as I got to this passage that God was actually speaking to me about not just them in the context of the story here, but actually I felt like he was speaking to us in our context today. So let's read this passage and then we'll begin to sort of see where God's taking us. So 1 Kings 19, we're going to start at verse 29. This will be a sign for you, Hezekiah. This is Isaiah speaking. And he's speaking the voice of God. This will be the sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself. And the second year, what springs from that. But the third year, sow and reap. Plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And once more, a remnant of the kingdom of Judah will take root below and will bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. And the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. You know, that coming invasion that Hezekiah was pondering, it was terrifying to think of. He'd already seen what had happened in the northern kingdom. And Hezekiah knew that if the Assyrians came, they would be likely, like what happened in the northern kingdom, they would be offered a surrender as a people group to leave Jerusalem and become subject to the empire of Assyria. And actually, as a king, the most pragmatic solution was to surrender, was to yield to that threat. But actually, God had a different plan. He had a different solution. He said, in the midst of warfare, there will be a remnant, those that survive, those that do not run away, a remnant who stay. And you're to wait. You're to wait patiently. You're to stay, don't leave, and step out again when the time is right. And then you will bear fruit, and it will be the Lord Almighty's doing. You know, when we faced an uncertain future, I've just outlined a picture for the Church of England which looks very, very uncertain. This church community over the last generation has faced a future that has been very uncertain. Lack of finances, the building falling down, not knowing where God was going to take them next as a community. So what has God been saying to us as a church in this last generation? And what is God saying to us now as part of the Church of England? He says this, stay and see me do a new thing. Stay and see me do a new thing. And out of that remnant, you will see a transitional growth. You will see transformation. And actually the reality for that generation who here stayed, 2018 this building was closed, and a remnant stayed and they gathered faithfully. They worshipped not in this building because it was closed and pretty much unusable. They worshipped at Totton Football Club, and a lot of them are still sitting here. They always gather over here. I love this is like the St. Wins, the OGs. There they are. You know, and I often say this, but I'm so thankful for them because they stayed. They chose to stay when it would have been very easy to have moved on. It would have been incredibly easy to have given up and gone to another church, beautiful building. And I know that many did that, you know, and everyone has their own call. But for this group of people, they chose to stay. And they chose to pray, and they chose to hang on in there and trust that God would do a new thing. And today I want to talk to you about where I sense God is calling us today as a church. You know, we are not the kingdom of Judah under the leadership of Hezekiah, under the threat of Assyria, but I believe that Isaiah's word still speaks to us today. And it is in verse 29 that I would like us to dig a little deeper. And this is verse 29. This year you will eat what grows by itself, and in the second year what springs from that. But in the third year sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And as I sat there in the summer, praying and pondering, Lord, what is it you're speaking to me about these verses? It suddenly struck me that we just celebrated 3 years since we revitalised St. Wins. We had our third birthday, if you like, in April this year. And I started to look at those verses and begin to sort of correlate them around what God has been doing with us as a community over the last 3 years. And so this is what I think God is saying through these verses for us today. Year one was a time of initial growth from the remnant of that existing congregation and the graft of the planting team from St. Mary's. I came from St. Mary's and I brought some people with us who were passionate about God, what God was doing here in this place. And so we joined together. It was all during COVID. It was all on Zoom. Here's a picture of some of us during COVID in a prayer meeting before we launched. Some of you might spot yourself in there. You know, like back in the day, this is all we had. It was when we first met each other in person, it was like, oh, you're that tall. Oh, because for a long time we gathered as a prayer group together, the existing congregation and some of us from the St. Mary's, and we just gathered together to pray. And then there was one momentous day when the restrictions lifted a little bit, and we met in the Memorial Car Park. Do you remember that? Anybody was there for that? And we went in the Memorial Car Park and we went for a little prayer walk around Totton. And it was so exciting to physically see people once more. You know, that was year one. That was in 2021. End of 2020, beginning of 2021. And in that first chapter, if you like, of that revitalization, we experienced, we were almost like gleaning the growth that came from connections with each other. We were beginning to glean what God had already sowed from that existing congregation and what we were bringing from St. Mary's. And as we began to gather in person, we launched online, if you remember, in April 2021. And then we were able to start meeting at Tesswood School in May 2021. And as we started to physically gather, people would invite friends and family. And it became this wonderful opportunity just to begin to see the seeds of growth of what God was doing. And we had people coming to visit us because they heard that we were an HTB plant. It was like, oh, that's exciting. Oh, what's that? So we had a lot of people coming to check us out during that time. And it was the outworking, if you like, of that first part of verse 29. You will eat what grows by itself. You know, the seeds had been grown donkey's years before, but there were people that were coming in and, in a sense, gleaning the fruit of what God had already done. And then we have the next phase that Isaiah speaks about, which is this. And the second year, what springs from that? And so in this season, we got another slide up there now. There we go. So that was 2020 and 2021. This was what we began to do in this first season: invitation prayer meetings, prayer walks. We had a bit of garden church when the buildings weren't ready. We met in my garden. And then we had our launch service. And then the next season is our next slide, I think. There we go. So this is what came in our next season. And it doesn't really neatly fit in with a year. It actually spanned, I'd say, about almost 2 years. And in this season, there was a whole bunch of stuff that began to happen as we began to sow and reap what had been springing from that initial growth. And so you can see here, this is what we've done over the last couple of years. Lots of stuff that we've done that in a sense has grown out of that initial phase. We've had Renew Cafe, which is a thriving ministry now that has seen great fruit. So much so that we're beginning to explore, should we open it on another morning or another afternoon because it's so popular? We've had the midweek service, which we've run ever since we launched, actually. And that's been a gathering of people that are around during the day to worship and pray. That happens on Wednesday afternoons. And we would love to see God call more people into that. We launched the Pillar, our successful ministry for working alongside young people who need support with their mental health. Again, absolutely phenomenal success, so much so that we've launched into a second site in Lord's Hill, and we desire to see God moving even more within that. There's so many things we could talk about here. I was hesitant about making this list because I know that there's going to be stuff that we've missed out. But we've got kids work and all that encapsulates. We've got our Tots and Toddler group, Bubbles, that meets here midweek. And then we have reconnections with schools, Abbotswood, Oakfield, all these different, Calmore Infants and Juniors. There's a continuance of our ministry, Open the Book, that is an ecumenical ministry with people from different churches in the Totton area, where people go in and tell Bible stories to children in schools. We've had holiday clubs, we've had movie mornings, we've had all sorts of things that happen, not just on a Sunday with what Leah does with the kids right now on a Sunday morning, but things that happen all the time. Youth work has restarted. Youth work here was phenomenal back in the day. Tori was an original person who came as a teenager to the youth work here back in the day. And what a joy to see some of that youth coming back as adults and refinding their faith. And we really believe that youth was something that God wanted to do in this place. And so we've restarted youth. And that's another really successful ministry, grown so much that they can't fit in the tower room upstairs anymore. The youth meet downstairs in the cafe on a Friday. So much to give thanks for. We've got our prayer room that we opened a couple of years ago, and there's been such an amazing number of people who've come and engaged and used that prayer room to book in to come, and that room, if you walk in, it's soaked in prayer. We long to see God do more, but there's so much that we've done through that. We started a ministry called Love Your Neighbour, the Christmas boxes. We've done that for the last couple of years, being able to support local families by gifting them with Christmas boxes of kindness at Christmas time. Huge impact on local families, particularly in the Calmore area. And there was some things that we started that didn't work as well as we thought they might have done. And it's worthwhile just reflecting that Brew 92, which was our community cafe, we started it because we really sensed God say he wanted to bring something of the community into the cafe area. And we started that, but it sort of lost its way a little bit over a few months. And so we made the really difficult decision to close it as it was and pray and ask God, would you bring that again in the right season and the right time? Let it be rooted really well so that it can flourish and grow. So not everything works well. And actually that's part of church, isn't it? That's the reality of church. So that was our second season and the second year, what springs from that. And it's been a busy time. Lots and lots of things that have been happening. But the next season, Isaiah describes as this. In the third year, there will be a time for stepping out in faith, to sow and reap, to plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And for us, I believe what that means is to actively invest in new growth, So what does that look like for us in this next season to come? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is something that actually has woven through who we are as a church community since we came in 2020, 2021, and that's prayer. And I am delighted that from the heart swell of Gus and Emma Seabrook, actually, they've come and they said, we want to start a new prayer ministry. We want to start something that is about praying with passion, linked to Isaiah 61. And they've called it I-61. That's quite nifty, isn't it? And what that's going to be is a monthly prayer group of people that come and pray with passion. You know, we've always been a praying community, but it's a new season. And I was just so delighted when they came to me a few months ago now and said, we think this is what God's saying. I said, yes, yes. And so I just want to say from the outset that this is one of our new things that we want to make as a foundation of everything that we do. So Isaiah 61. Based on the prophetic words, as I say, of Isaiah 61, which is all about bringing good news to the poor, binding up the brokenhearted, proclaiming freedom for the captives. And actually, if you've been around for any time, you'll know that our vision statement, Lives Transformed, Hope Restored, Freedom Found, is in a sense a derivative of Isaiah 61. And so from that fresh impetus of prayer once more will come some new things that I think God is calling us into. And the first thing, as you've seen up there, some kind of, and this is all very, at the moment, none of this is fixed in stone. These are ideas that I really believe God is calling us into in this new season. Some kind of community gathering hub, bringing back the heart's desire of what Brew 92 was, to gather the community, the outside community in to who we are as a church, to use that fantastic cafe space to be able to welcome people in. And we want to make it a kind of hub where lots of things are happening all the time, centered around great coffee and great welcome. And one of the things that we've been sort of batting around and praying about is some kind of way of having a place where people can receive provision for food. You know, all of our food here is going to go to the Basics Bank, which is based up at Testwood Baptist. And you know, one of our things is we've never ever wanted to duplicate what some other church is doing absolutely brilliantly. There's literally no point in doing that. And so we don't want to start up a food basics bank because that's pretty pointless. But what we do want to do is we want to be able to have some kind of offering where we can give away, a bit like Harvest, where we can give away the plenty that we have to bless other people. And so Tim is in the middle of just researching and working out and sensing and discerning what that might look like for us. But it'll root itself within this community cafe hub. It's going to be something that people are going to come to and then stay for a cup of coffee and make relationship with people. So I've got food provision up there. You'll see another thing I've got up there is CAP. Julie Martin has headed that up over the last year or so. You know, we want to bring that back. We'd love to bring CAP back. CAP stands for Christians Against Poverty. We passionately believe that this church should be a place where people come and find a good foundation for good living around their finances. It's really practical help. And we would love to see that restart again within the cafe, the community hub. We want to get that going. And lastly, I am praying around lots of different ideas, and almost every week somebody comes to me with another idea around something that we could run, something that is offered that will springboard from that community hub, a gathering of generations, different generations doing different stuff. So that, you know, people will say to me, I think we should have a place for older people to gather and find relationship and connection. Let's have a cafe where people play board games. Let's have a place where young parents can come and find support and practical advice as they raise young children. You know, and I'm just saying to the Lord, I know you're in this, but we need to find the right things to start in this season. So some of this is I'm almost hesitant to say because it's not all going to happen tomorrow, but it will come in this next third year, if you like, of us as a church community. That community hub is key to making connections with the people that we operate and live amongst in this area. Another area that I believe God is calling us into is the area of Calmore. St. Anne's and Calmore has been a gift for us as a church, and we've kind of waited as a community. You know, we had some grand plans last year of starting some ministries. We wanted to do some new things in Calmore, and for various reasons they stalled. Really because the Lord has said it's not the right time, and so we've waited. But I am so passionate about seeing new things things happening in Calmore. We have great connections with the schools in Calmore, and I really believe that God is calling us to do some kids and ministry and family work in that area. And again, we're just discerning what that looks like and how we can facilitate that. The building of St. Anne's is just an absolute gift for us to use as a midweek space. If you haven't been, come and check it out on a Sunday. It's a beautiful space, really cozy, really welcoming, and it's in a great location for us to do ministry with the people of Calmore in that area. And so do pray with us as we actively discern what God is calling us into Calmore. Some of the ideas that we're thinking around this is not exhaustive, and please don't hold me to these, but this gives you a flavour of the kind of things that we're thinking of. Daytime alphas, being able to sort of gather and meet in St. Anne's. What about after school clubs for those children from the Calmore schools there? Or something like Lego Church, which I know has happened in this parish a while ago. But Lego Church is a great way for kids to come and just explore stories of the Bible using Lego. It's as simple as that. It's a fantastic tool. All sorts of different ideas. We could do loads of things like that, but we're pressing into God. What is it you're saying? But we know that Calmore is part of the puzzle. And lastly, the last thing I want to say is that there is a call for us. If you go on to my next slide, there we go. You'll see there's an icon at the bottom. And this links to this last part of these verses from 2 Kings. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant and a planting of new vineyards. And I think God is calling us as a season to be able to do what it was part of our original vision, was to equip and to send out people and to revitalize again a fresh area somewhere in this local area. We don't know where that's going to be yet. We're actively pursuing God. Where is it you're calling us to have influence? Where is it you're calling us to be able to step in with the people in that area and encourage them in transformational growth for you? And so do listen out, because in this next season, we do believe that God will be calling some of us in this congregation to be part of that new story. And we don't know yet whether that's going to happen in the near future or in a couple of years, 2-3 years' time. We just don't know. But I do believe that we're stepping into a season where God is calling us out of the building and into the areas near around us, maybe outside of our parish borders, where we can bring the word of God in a fresh way and work alongside those already there who love Jesus. And there is something in that about the idea of it being outwards. We've had a season where a lot of what we've done is grow ministries that have impacted the outside, actually. But it's been a lot of growing us and working out who we are. But I think we're stepping into a new season where, as we are transformed by God, we now step out and begin to extend our borders, begin to extend our vineyards, till the ground, plant, sow, and then see what God wants to grow from it. But we need to be ready. Some of those ideas are very exciting. You might look at some of those and go, oh yeah, I'd like to get involved with all of those things, or some of those things. There might be something on that list that I go, oh yes, my spirit resonates with that. But it goes back to what I talked about last week. All of this is good ideas, but it won't become God ideas unless it's rooted in transformation individually for us as a people group here. Otherwise, it just becomes empty words, empty stuff, empty projects, and we run out of steam really quickly when it's like that. But when God is doing a work inside us individually, when we come together and we see what God is doing, that is when the fruit begins to come. And in that verse, it says, verse 30 says, take root below. Take root below. And as Isaiah prophesies that, he doesn't say take root below first and then wait for a season and then the fruit will come. No, it all happens at the same time. The remnant will stay. There's waiting patiently. There's the seasons of 1 year, 2 years. Take root below during all of it, and then you will bear fruit from above. If we wait for when we're feeling great in ourselves for all these things to start happening, we could be waiting forever. God is looking for a people group who say yes now, but are willing to go deep with him. The staff team have been spending some time thinking about the different areas of our church life, and we are compelled that we need to give a greater amount of time to invest in discipleship growth for us as a church community, taking root below. Ways that we can grow in our faith and in our maturity, ways to enable people to flourish so that they're ready to get involved in the intense outward planting and growing phase that we are stepping into. We're going to share more about that next term, actually, about how we can work together as a church community and see where we are in the journey of where God has placed us. But we're already starting that intense growing deeper by trialing a new 4-week course called The Way for new Christians. We've designed it this time around to follow on from Alpha. And it's going to help new believers understand more about the Bible and how it all fits together within a Bible overview, how to read the Bible, and then give some practical steps for those new followers of Jesus to on their journey of faith. Now, it could well be that you're sitting there thinking, gosh, I wish I'd had that when I first became a Christian. I don't know much about where the Bible fits together, and I'd love to know how to read the Bible better. Well, hold on, because we really believe that actually the way is likely to end up morphing into a kind of discipleship kind of thing that we're going to expand and develop after we've trialled it this term. So we're going to be doing this after Alpha immediately in mid-November this year for 4 weeks. And then based on that, we'll do a bit of frantic rewrite. And then we'll launch it again in the January term, not just for new converts to Christianity, but for people who want to go deeper in their faith. And in a sense, we want to do this all over our church community. We want to be looking at where we can go deeper, where we can equip you more, where we can actively do some teaching, some Bible teaching in more rigorous ways. Because we're very conscious that as we send people out, they need to be rooted. We need to be rooted well. And so that's just a little flavour of one of the things that we've started already to plan. So what's next? What's next? Here are some of the areas where we believe God is sending us out into from 24 into 25 and then beyond. I don't want to put a time limit on any of these things because it never really neatly fits into that. But we know we're stepping into a new season. So what can you do in this new season? Well, firstly, you need to join us to pray. Nothing will happen unless we bring it to the Lord and ask him to be with us and for us to lean in, to listen to what he's saying. Join us in the next time, the first, in a sense, the first official meeting of I-61, which is going to be on the 21st of October at 7:30, which is Monday night here in the church. We'd love you to come and join us. Do you know, wouldn't it be amazing if nearly the whole church turned up just to pray? Some of you are going to be in Christmas choir where you can pray as you're singing. Wouldn't that be amazing if the church turned up to pray? Wouldn't that be an extraordinary testimony to say we are actively wanting to pursue you, God, in what you want to do in this place? Pray. Take a look at what stirs your heart. Is it something around the community hub? Is it something around hospitality and welcome? And then seeing the different things that are going to spin out of that. Is it Calmore? Do you live in Calmore? Do you feel that you've got a skill set that would be able to really lend itself to some of the stuff that we want to do in Calmore? Or is it that your heart is for venturing out into planting and revitalization? A bit of an adventure, seeing where that is going to take us as a church community. I promise you, we won't rush into any of these things until the time is right. But that is what I believe the Lord spoke to me about over this summer time. And I want to come to you and say, this is what I think. I'm not saying that I get it right all of the time, but this is what I think God is saying. Join me to discern whether what I think God is saying is right. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have words or pictures or scripture that confirm some of those things, I'd love to hear from you. Church, this is the opportunity for us to be transformed individually, to take Jesus seriously, to see him work in our life. And this is the season where we need to buckle up our belts, roll up, I don't know what the phrase is, like with your belt and braces, whatever it is, I don't know. I should have stopped there. Like get serious about where we are going next as a church. It's exciting, isn't it? Exciting to think what God is calling us into. If the band would like to come back, we're going to pray and we're going to worship. And then we're going to take communion together as a symbol and a sign that we are church family together. So would you like to stand with me? And I'm going to pray for us as we go into that time together.